Hello everyone and welcome back to my opinion. And this video will be me previewing the World Test Championship final, which starts in a couple of days' time. I've said this long back, but in the pretext of the previous World Test Championship final, I thought that there was a disparity in competitive match practice between the two sides in question going to the final. New Zealand had played a two-match test series against England and won that series by 1-0. Comparing the conditions in England and in New Zealand with the ball moving around in a relatively similar way, you would have thought that New Zealand would have or would be better placed to compete in this final game than a side that hadn't played competitive cricket for at least 2 or 3 weeks going into this game. And going from India to England and trying to adapt to the conditions without playing virtually any practice games, you'd think trying to win a one-off final before you play a series against England would be quite a tough ask to do so. And considering that India competing like they did in the first half of that game with a great achievement, 217 not out, they collapsed when they were batting, but New Zealand also got 249, very good bowling performances from both sides and a collapse from the batting sides respectively. But at that point in time, with India only trailing by 32, you thought they'd done quite well to compete in that game up till then. And unfortunately for them, after that point in time, New Zealand, it was virtually New Zealand's game from that point onwards. And I don't understand why, one, there was so much expectation going into that game from an Indian perspective, and as well as the fact that there was a bit of quite some disappointment with the fact that they had lost that game, because they dealt themselves, or they were dealt, such a hand where it was quite improbable for them to compete after a certain point in time in that game and come out of that game with a victory. So that was on that. I don't think that would be a situation in this case, as both sides are going in relatively cold, with the IPL going on for the last 2 months, and Australia also with a few players playing in the county circuit such as Smith and Labuschagne, but I think the others are going in relatively cold. So I think it'll be quite even in that regard, but I'll now get into my preview in detail, and I'll give my view on who I think has the edge going into that final. This game will be played at the Kia Oval. Now, I'll start things off by walking you through the characteristics of playing test match cricket at this venue in the last few years, as well as providing a recent example. So regarding scoring rates at this venue, it's been around that 3-point-something runs per over mark, varying towards the batting side in terms of their favour. And regarding the phase progression over the 5 days when playing a test match at this venue, day 1 is a day where, yes, there's some movement for the seamers, but it's generally a day for the batsmen. Day 2 is a day where the seamers get quite a lot of wickets, and while the scoring rate remains the same, it is a day for the seamers. Day 3 and day 4 are pivotal days in a side securing their advantage going into, or forming an advantage going to that 5th day. And a side chasing on day 5 won't find it easy. So that is the general phase progression in the last few years when playing a test at this venue. And on bowler effectiveness, the seamers are effective on the first 2 days, especially on day 2 where they perform the best out of all the other days in the test. Regarding the 3rd innings and the 4th innings, their effectiveness drops drastically, especially in the 3rd. And for spinners, their effectiveness increases as the game wears on. An example to back up this trend would be the 4th test of the India versus England series played a couple of years ago, with the 4th test being played at this venue. India batted first and scored 191, were bowled out for 191 in their first innings on day 1, an under par total considering the trend that I mentioned in the previous segment of this video. Looking at the bowling figures in terms of who took wickets for England, Ollie Robinson and Chris Wilkes shared 7 wickets between them, and England finished day 1 on 53 for 3, with Jasprit Bumrah taking 2 wickets and Umesh Yadav taking 1. So like I said, the seamers did have a telling effect on day 1. On day 2, while the scoring rate was brisk, England were bowled out for 290. They recovered from 62 for 5 to get to the score that they did, but towards the end of day 2 going into day 3, the surface was beginning to ease out, and India finished on 43 without loss at the end of day 2. And even though he went for runs or was expensive, Umesh Yadav picked 3 wickets for 76 runs in his 19 overs, and Jasprit Bumrah gave 67 runs in his 21 overs, picking up 2 wickets. So once again, the seamers did have an effect. On days 3 and 4, India really capitalized since the surface eased out. They got to 466, and England were 75 without loss, I think, at the end of day 4. Now, I went to day 5 in that game, and I posted a video straight after that victory. And I wasn't aware of this information going into day 5 at that point in time, so I thought England, with 10 wickets in hand, with a service that seemingly didn't seem to do much based on the couple of days that preceded, I thought England were favourites to win the game. The service still didn't seem like it was doing too much watching the game at the ground, but it was a fantastic win from an Indian perspective. And if I had that information, the information that I have now then, I think I would have been a lot more optimistic going into that final day. I think the game will play out in a similar way. And I think if it does, then the side that wins the toss and bats first will hold the advantage in this game. And I've spoken about the seamers. Now, if you're looking at the spinners, England didn't field a spinner in that. Well, they didn't bowl a spinner in their first innings. They only bowled the 4 seamers. Moeen Ali and Joe Root bowled 33 overs between them and picked up 3 wickets in the 3rd innings, where things weren't going too well for either side. However, or not for either side, rather for England. But however, the effect of the spinners did increase as the game went on, like I mentioned. India bowled Ravindra Jadeja in England's first innings, and he picked up 2 wickets for 36 runs in 17 overs, at a very good economy rate of 2.11, where everyone else went at least 3 and over. And in the 4th innings, Ravindra Jadeja bowled 30 overs, 2 for 50, at an economy rate of 1.66, also aided by Jasprit Bumrah. Even though the seamers may have had, according to the stats that or the trend that I mentioned, seamers would have less of an effect than they would have done in the first 2 days. 2 for 27 and 22, an outstanding performance by him. So it shows that even though India were behind in the game with being dismissed for 191, them playing their cards right in terms of dismissing England for a score where they didn't concede too much of a lead, then took advantage of days 3 and 4 and got the job done in day 5. So that's the kind of situation where while the team batting first had wanted to get slightly more runs in the first innings, I think that's the kind of situation where the teams would be looking to bat first, as when I suggest the 11s in a short while, you'd find out that with some absentees in the side for both teams, they wouldn't want to be stuck on a situation that they concede a lot of runs in the 3rd innings and find it tough to chase that score down in the 4th. My Indian 11 would be Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill opening the batting, with Cheteshwar Pujara, Virat Kohli and Ajinkya Rahane being 3, 4 and 5. An expected top 5 there. There's been some debates as to who would take the gloves. In my view, it's an easy decision. That would be KS Bharat. Number 7 would be Ravindra Jadeja. Number 8, Ravichandran Ashwin. I'll get to playing 2 spinners very shortly. Umesh Yadav and Mohammad Shami can bat a bit at 9 and 10, and Mohammad Siraj at number 11. Now, Mohammad Siraj and Mohammad Shami have been in fantastic form of late, and on Umesh Yadav, his record overseas is nowhere near as good as his record at home. And another thing is that whether it be the last test of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy or during the IPL where he didn't play too many games, he hasn't been able to be in his best bowling rhythm of late because of his fitness issues. Going from that situation, if you have to bowl in a test match where you have to bowl 6 or 7 over spells at a time, how would he fare? I don't know. And in terms of the other options available, there have been some notable absentees. I don't think Jasprit Bumrah will be back anytime soon. Ishant Sharma, unfortunately, is he at the situation where he can bowl 6 or 7 over spells consistently? Even though he played the IPL, I don't think so. Very unfortunately. Prasidh Krishna, in an ideal world, should have been Ishant Sharma's replacement in the Test side. A fantastic bowler. When he has bowled, especially in last year's IPL, we've seen how good of a bowler he is. Played the ODI series against England last year. Unfortunately, has been injured for the past month now. And he hasn't played a single Test match for India, I don't think. I think he's played in a warm-up game before the 5th Test India played against England at Edgbaston. Apart from that, he hasn't played a Test match for India as such, as kind of a main Test match for the side. So I think it's been an unfortunate thing for him, but that's just how his injury situation has gone. And a few batsmen such as KL Rahul missing as well. So there are a few notable absentees. And I think there was a case where Jaydev had picked up a shoulder injury towards the latter stages of the IPL. I didn't think he would be available for this game, and there was some talk on Twitter amongst some that they could pick him for this game. In my view, he wouldn't be able to play this game because of the significant injury that he picked up towards the latter stages of the IPL. And Shardul Thakur is a bowler. I think the only other seamer they've got in terms of someone they could play in the side, and he also gives runs a bit, despite the fact that he has a knack of taking wickets. And the reason why I've gone with the 11 that I've gone, I think the top 7 kind of picks itself. I've gone with KS Bharat because he's played a few Test matches for India, and I think as of now in Tests he is the better option. And I've gone with Ravindra Jadeja and Ravichandran Ashwin being 2 spinners. Now, when India toured England a couple of years ago, Ashwin didn't play a single Test match in India, won 2 out of the 4 games. It was 2-1 before the 5th game was played and was 2-2 overall. Now, I think in this case, you've got a case where if you're looking at the Indian team, it's Umesh Yadav, Mohammad Shami and Mohammad Siraj. Now, for the first 2 days, there will be assistance for the seamers, especially in day 2. But if it's a case where pretend in a situation that wouldn't be ideal for India, if Australia win the toss and choose to bat first, and if they bat on days 3 and 4, where you've got an Umesh Yadav, Mohammad Shami and Mohammad Siraj, where Mohammad Shami, you think if there isn't too much for him with a new ball in that situation, he would give runs. He goes at above 3 and over in England. Mohammad Siraj and Umesh Yadav, you'd think also would give runs, especially Umesh Yadav if there's not much assistance for the seamers in days 3 and 4. And that could be the difference between winning and losing, like we did see in that game where India played against England a couple of years back. Like I said, the effectiveness of the spinners improves as the game wears on. Now, when they played Jadeja only, you saw the impact that he had, and imagine if they play Ashwin and Jadeja in a case where India bat first, get more than what they got against England a couple of years ago, then they take advantage of days 3 and 4, and there'll be an Australian side chasing quite a good score against the 2 spinners in Jadeja and Ashwin, where it's tough to bat on day 5 at the Oval. So that would be the perfect situation for India, and you'd also get batting as well in Jadeja at number 7, Ashwin at 8, and Umesh Yadav and Mohammad Shami at 9 and 10 can do their bit. So I think it would cover the batting as well as the bowling. Based on what they did before, if they do play Shardul Thakur, you've got a case where, like I said, if Australia win especially if Australia win the toss and choose to bat first, India would have to bowl in the 3rd innings on days 3 and 4. They may have to bowl at that point in time. They probably would do, where you've got Shardul Thakur, who gives runs usually. Umesh Yadav gives runs when bowling an overseas test. Mohammad Shami, Mohammad Siraj not getting much assistance from the wicket at that point in time. There'll be too much pressure on Ravindra Jadeja to succeed. This side will not be like the England side India played at that point in time, like I may have mentioned earlier on in the video, where they really weren't confident with the bat at all. So in a game that India should expect the opposition to fare better than what England did with the bat, then I think going with 2 spinners would be the correct way, and you'd get some more batting as well. So that is on there. For Australia, I'd go with David Warner and Usman Khawaja opening their batting with Marnus Labuschagne at 3 and Steve Smith at 4. Travis Head at 5, Cameron Green at 6, Alex Carey at number 7, Pat Cummins at 8 and Mitchell Starc at 9. So you've got the batting depth there, and you've got a Nathan Lyon that can do something at number 10 like we have seen in the past. And in place of Josh Hazlewood, I've gone with Scott Boland. Now, regarding Josh Hazlewood, in the last while he spent a significant amount of time on the sidelines due to injury. I don't know what the problem is. I hope it gets sorted out because he's a fantastic bowler. No disrespect to Scott Boland, but had Josh Hazlewood been available to play in this game, I would have given the bowling edge to Australia, considering two of their steamers in Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood being, in my view, able to manage better across the 5 days than the Indian seamers. I think with those two, every ball they bowl, they seem like a wicket-taking threat. They don't give many runs, and you can back them to take wickets as well. Batting first is the right way to go, and if India do win the toss and choose to bat first, which would be the correct call, on day 2, which is the best performing day for seamers at this venue in test matches, you've got you may have got Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood bowling in tandem, where the ball moves around most, so which would have been quite a challenge for the batsman to face. So India would be very happy that Josh Hazlewood isn't playing this game, and therefore the bowling load in terms of the seamers would be more on Pat Cummins. The reason why I'm saying this is because with the 4 first choice bowlers available, I've said this before, Mitchell Starc is a luxury bowler in this attack. The other 3 take the greater responsibility. But Mitchell Starc, if he gets early wickets up front, it makes things easier for the side. He kind of bowls up front and looks to kind of blow teams away. And I feel, like I said, is he going to be, can you confidently say he's going to be an outright threat in this game? I don't think you can do. He's a luxury bowler in the side. And without Josh Hazlewood, you've got the load more so on Pat Cummins and Nathan Lyon, with Scott Boland not having played a test match in England thus far. Cameron Green's best bowling suit is in tests, but we'll have to see how he goes, since he usually bowls as an extra bowler where you've got the other 3 available. And yeah, like I said, in terms of the seamers, you've only got Pat Cummins as the frontline threat, the bankable threat at this point in time, where you know what you're going to get from him. So without Josh Hazlewood, Australia would be thinking they'll be hoping Mitchell Starc and Scott Boland come good in this game, because I think they'll need those two to come good in the absence of Josh Hazlewood. But in the batting, even though you've got a couple of players that, while they've been in great form recently, they haven't got great records in England, those 2 players being Usman Khawaja and Travis Head. If Australia win the toss and choose to bat first, if Australia get to bat on days 3 and 4, you've got informed players like Usman Khawaja, Travis Head, Labuschagne and Steve Smith, a Cameron Green scoring 100 against India and Ahmedabad, and you'd think even a David Warner, where he hasn't been in great form in tests in the last 2 years, in this WTC cycle, he's averaged 31, and that included a double century as well. He's not got a great record in England. But if you've got a case where you've got that top 6 in conditions where the ball doesn't do too much for the seamers on day 3 and day 4, they could really power on the runs and make life very difficult for India. And when you're chasing that kind of a score, where you've got Pat Cummins and a Nathan Lyon, where he, I think, would be the main threat on day 5, I think Australia would be finding their chances. So even though they've got players that have been in great form but haven't got great records in England thus far, I think the current form will help them, especially if Australia do choose to win the toss and choose to bat first, which, like I said, is the correct way to go. And looking at the Indian batsmen, their records at this, in England, you've got the case where Rohit Sharma, 5 test matches, I think, 44 his average. Shubman Gill hasn't played too much in England, and when the ball swings can be vulnerable. And if India do choose to bat first, the first 2 days would be the case where the ball does move around most. Cheteshwar Pujara hasn't got a great record in international cricket in England in terms of averages. He averages, I think, 32 in this World Test Championship cycle all in all, and England averages near that 30 mark. But for Sussex in the county championship, he's averaged, I think, 68, scoring 500 odd runs, 3 centuries and a 50. He's been in great form, so he will be a player that they will rely on. Virat Kohli, do I think he'll do too much in this game? Not, especially if India bat first. I don't think he'll do much in the first innings. However, in the second innings, if India get the opportunity to bat on days 3 and 4, if you've got players such as Shubman Gill, Virat Kohli, Ajinkya Rahane, and Rohit Sharma, where the ball, when the ball isn't doing too much for the seamers, I think they could pile on the runs like they did against England, and then that could make life difficult for Australia, especially if India play both Ravindra Jadeja and Ravichandran Ashwin, which is the correct call. Rahane has been in very good form in the first class circuit, and he'll be confident after a good IPL as well. I'm not saying it relates to Test cricket, but he has been doing on first class cricket as well. So India have got the batting to, I think, win this game. I think the key for them is, like the previous time against England, they'll be looking to capitalise on the second innings if they do get a chance to bat on day 3 and 4. Like I said, both sides would be looking to win the toss, choosing to bat first, and whoever bats in those day 3 and 4, even for Australia, in terms of the players that the side that would probably cope better in that phase, like I said, Pat Cummins, would much rather him bowl, even when the ball isn't doing as much, as he would probably cope much better than the Indian teamers, where Umesh Yadav, Mohammad Shami, Mohammad Siraj, I think that, especially after early on, you would think, how would they go? And you'd think not too well. And this is why I'm saying, I hope India play the 2 spinners in Ashwin and Jadeja. If you play Shardul Thakur alongside those 3 seamers, you've got an Australian batting lineup where they'd really be fancying their chances. So who do I think is going to win? If India play 2 spinners, win the toss, choose to bat first, I think is them. But I think, like I said, if Australia do choose to bat first, and you've got India, if they potentially play the extra seamer, Australia will be really fancying their chances. So a tough one to call. So I think a lot is dependent on how the toss goes, and let's see how this game goes. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, share it with your friends. Remember, this is my opinion. What's yours?